What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. It is my pleasure and my privilege to offer up my review for what has been to date my most anticipated movie of the year, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And now that I've seen it, it is my favorite movie of the year that I've seen so far. This flick doesn't come out for a couple days, so not to worry. I'll keep my opening remarks 100% spoiler-free until I give you a big, fat, juicy warning. But that totally works for me because there's so much cool stuff to discuss about this movie that has nothing to do with the plot itself. As much as I've enjoyed Quentin Tarantino's 21st century movies, I have noticed in the past that there's something special about a movie set in Los Angeles that really brings out a unique quality in Tarantino. Apart from a few years in Tennessee as a kid, Tarantino spent his entire life in Los Angeles, and clearly this movie is his overt love song to Hollywood, Hollywood history, specifically the Hollywood of 1969, and all of the actors, stuntmen, and filmmakers who put their heart and souls into creating a lot of the movies and shows of that era that most people these days have probably forgotten. The Hollywood of this period is one of massive cultural upheaval, one where Hollywood was trying desperately to adapt to rapidly changing tastes, resulting in a lot of artists and filmmakers and actors left scratching their heads wondering what the hell was happening to their careers. And featured front and center in this evolving landscape, we have our three leads played brilliantly by Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie, all of whom do some of the best work of their careers. I can't remember the last time a movie felt so immersive in a specific time and place, with classic radio stations and old TV programs blasting away in nearly every scene. While there are a lot of filmmakers out there who are rabid film fanatics, there's never been a director who gets me more excited to watch old, obscure movies than Quentin Tarantino. In particular, the movies that have inspired or informed whatever project he's currently working on. People like to think they're playing a game of gotcha when they catch Tarantino being inspired by old movies, but he's more than happy to create lists of all these movies so that we can enjoy them as well. And because Tarantino owns and programs the New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles, he came up with a brilliant marketing scheme where he programmed an entire month of movies that help us better understand the pop culture landscape in which we find his three characters. When I lived in Los Angeles from 1999 to 2006, I used to hit the New Beverly all the time, and here's a taste of the program that he put together for July. Even better, Tarantino went on the Pure Cinema podcast and for over 2 hours walked listeners through each and every movie on the program and why it's relevant to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. These movies aren't homework, and you can totally enjoy the movie on its own merits, but Tarantino's movies in the past have always been invitations to explore the obscure gems of film history. To supplement this list, Tarantino also worked with Sony TV to program even more movies to give us a better appreciation of this period. And for the last few weeks, I've been chipping away at a lot of these movies that I'd never seen before. If you're into westerns, Gunman's Walk is a fantastic tab hunter vehicle, or you can check out Jim Brown, Burt Reynolds, and Raquel Welch teaming up in 100 Rifles. If you like comedies, Cactus Flower will absolutely make you howl. Arthur Penne's The Chase is quintessential Southern Gothic with Jane Fonda and Robert Redford in their absolute prime. And if you want a small taste of the chaos of campus radicalism at this time, Getting Straight starring Elliot Gould will leave you riveted, if only because of the shock of seeing Harrison Ford playing a spaced-out stoner. But getting back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino was 6 years old at the time this movie takes place, so this is not the Hollywood that he experienced. On the Pure Cinema podcast, he admits that at that age, he basically sat around watching Batman. But as one of our most passionate film historians, he spent decades learning everything he can about this period and the various pop culture trends before and after. What's cool is how his obsession informs the narrative but doesn't replace it, which is a real risk anytime you're dealing with nostalgia and storytelling. The sentimental love for this period, it's window dressing, but it's not the feature attraction. That said, for the first 30 or 40 minutes, initially, I was a little uptight that Tarantino was going to completely lose himself in this era and not tell a story. Ever since the death of his longtime editor, Sally Menke, Tarantino's been more prone to self-indulgence, letting scenes go on for a little too long instead of cutting away at their emotional peak. But when this movie finally does find its proper storytelling gear, I felt myself unclenching my jaw, relaxing my grip on my armrest, and giving myself over entirely to the movie. It's quite different from what's come before in his career, and I'm not sure if everyone's going to have the same experience I had. I'm anticipating a wide range of responses, from total love to blind hate to complete and total indifference. But for my part, I'd give anything to be in the theater watching it again right now. So I'm starting to get near the end of the road of my non-spoiler section, but I'll close with this. If the trailer grabs you, so will the movie. If you hate Tarantino, and I have several friends who do, this movie's probably not going to change your mind. But if, like me, you find Tarantino to be one of the last filmmakers who understands the importance of making movies that are nothing but pure ecstasy for the senses and the human imagination, you're probably going to dig this movie. So this is my last spoiler warning. Bail out now, because I'm about to dig into some specifics of why I love this movie so dearly. Let's start with Leonardo DiCaprio, a leading man famous for picking and choosing his projects very carefully. In a Deadline interview, Tarantino had some interesting things to say about how Leo went about tackling the part of Rick Dalton. While Tarantino done a brilliant job of cooking up this entire imaginary history with all of Rick Dalton's shows and movies, that wasn't really useful to an actor when it came to bringing the necessary emotion to the part. Leo is happy to watch a lot of old movies with Tarantino, but he has his own process as an actor. And the character of Rick Dalton, unlike DiCaprio, is a person whose best days are probably behind him. He's a square-jawed, old-school TV cowboy. He drinks too much, he hates hippies, and now all of a sudden he finds himself increasingly adrift in a business that he no longer understands. He doesn't get the appeal of spaghetti westerns. Admittedly, he hasn't really watched any, and the only parts he's being offered now are those of villains in other people's weekly TV shows where he's quickly killed off. But this is a position that so many actors of that era like Ed Burns, Ty Hardin, and Vince Edwards found themselves in, where they struggled to switch over to movies and maintain their leading man status. Some guys like Burt Reynolds and Steve McQueen pulled it off, and in one of the most eerily beautiful scenes of the movie, we see Leo imagining scenes from The Great Escape where he's playing Steve McQueen's role. Imagining what might have been had they said yes instead of no or no instead of yes must eat so many actors alive from the inside out. But at the beginning of the story, clearly Rick Dalton's career is at a crossroads, and Leo absolutely kills it, expressing all of Rick Dalton's insecurities and self-doubt. He weeps constantly, and in one of the best scenes of the movie, he finds his inspiration in a dedicated child actress who's the model of professionalism and dedication. So much of this movie is about Rick Dalton picking himself up, regaining his swagger, and potentially reinventing himself for a new era. And along for the ride is a man who's more than a friend but not quite a wife, Rick Dalton's struggling stuntman Cliff Booth, played to perfection by Brad Pitt in one of the best roles of his career. Blonde and absolutely ripped, everything about Cliff Booth screams California as he races around town in his boss's car. Rick Dalton's no longer allowed to drive due to one too many drunken evenings behind the wheel, and now Cliff Booth has to look after him. Cliff Booth is in even worse shape due to the rumor that he murdered his wife and got away with it, so now the only time he gets work is when Rick Dalton throws his weight around, an increasingly tough thing to do now that Dalton's career's in decline. And in yet another one of the best scenes of the movie, we see Cliff Booth getting thrown off the set of The Green Hornet when he gets into an argument with Bruce Lee about whether or not Bruce Lee could handle Cassius Clay, aka Muhammad Ali, in a fight. The argument leads to a very entertaining friendly contest between the two performers. Mike Moe, he absolutely kills it as Bruce Lee, in particular in a brief scene where we see him training Sharon Tate for her action scene in the comedy The Wrecking Crew. But getting back to Cliff, it's through his character that we're introduced to the homicidal hippies that are flocking to Charles Manson's ranch, which happens to be where Rick and Cliff used to shoot their old TV show. Cliff picks up a beautiful young hippie named Pussycat, played by Margaret Qualley, and ends up driving her back to the compound, where the movie suddenly transitions from this love song to Hollywood to something that feels like it could turn into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre any second. Tarantino's movies have made me feel many things over the years, but I've never felt dread or fear in one of his movies until now. Tarantino admits that he was afraid of hippies as a kid, and we see that fear manifest itself here in this movie. The only thing that releases the tension, both here and at the climax of the movie, is when we see just how Cliff Booth is at taking care of business when people get in his face. Brad Pitt's basically like this giant jungle cat in this movie. He's able to leap around on rooftops. He's awesome in a fist fight. He's just so physically primal, and he's well into his 50s at this point. But I can't emphasize enough just how good Pitt is in this role and how funny he can be. He has several adorable scenes hanging out with his dog feeding him, and the dog turns out to be equally good at fighting Manson's deranged cult. And as we saw with Inglourious Bastards, Tarantino rewrites history here, with Manson's gang eventually invading Rick Dalton's home, which is right next door to Sharon Tate's. The violence in this scene is so over the top and so deranged and so funny that I don't know if Tarantino can ever top it. Cliff Booth, who's tripping balls on acid at the time, throws down with three psychos, and with the help of his dog, he takes out two of them. And then Rick Dalton, who's totally shit-faced hanging out in this pool, ends up whipping out a flamethrower from one of his movies in order to finish off the third. People who don't like to have fun and write really annoying movie reviews will react to this scene in their predictable, boring fashion, but for my own part, I was screaming with laughter. What's great is how in Tarantino's imaginary world, Sharon Tate gets to live, and to that I say, hell yes, because this movie will absolutely make you fall in love with her. Margot Robbie's on fire in this movie, in particular during one lengthy dance sequence at the Playboy Mansion, where she rocks out on the dance floor with the mamas and the papas and other celebrities. In what is easily her sweetest scene, we see her take a break to go see The Wrecking Crew at a movie theater, a movie in which she co-starred with Dean Martin. Personally, I prefer in the movie The Fearless Vampire Killers, but she goes there discreetly to see how the audience is responding to the comedic bits. I should also mention that she walks in during a trailer for Cece and Company, a movie that I saw for the first time while getting ready for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you like biker movies and Margaret and football legend Joe Namath, I strongly urge you to see it. In any event, Margot Robbie is just an absolute angel in this role, and seeing her look around the theater in excitement as folks enjoy her performance is basically what movies are all about. Even better, because she's not the victim of a horrible massacre at the hands of the Manson family, at the end of this movie, she befriends Rick Dalton and invites him into her swanky home that she shared at the time with one of the hottest young directors in Hollywood, Roman Polanski, hinting that perhaps Rick Dalton just might have a few more doors open to him in the future. So as I start getting near the end of my little rant, I do need to give a shout out to a few more little ingredients. Tarantino's love and affection for director Sergio Corbucci is all over this movie. When Sharon Tate goes to see The Wrecking Crew, we see an absolutely gorgeous poster for The Mercenary in the lobby. And when Al Pacino's character finally talks Rick Dalton into flying to Italy to shoot a few movies, the first one he makes is Nebraska Jim, an obvious homage to Sergio Corbucci's real movie, Minnesota Clay. Like so many actors in the 1960s, making a few flicks in Italy was a great way to stay busy after their Hollywood careers had kind of cooled off, and this little chapter is one of the most enjoyable sections of the movie, especially when we see Cliff Booth getting to enjoy an epic moment in his career as a stuntman jumping a bridge in Operazione Dynamite. My hope is that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood will ignite a new interest in some of the obscure films from the 50s, 60s, and 70s that have obviously fueled the creation of this film. If you're a cinephile, your journey is never really complete, your education is never really over, and once you've watched your favorite movies 100 times over and most of the essential classics, I find the best way to reignite your passion is to get back into the role of a student, discovering forgotten filmmakers, forgotten stars. But the big question moving forward is what at this point continues to give Tarantino the passion to keep working. He's hinted that he might be done with directing after this movie, or that perhaps he might do a play. Some Star Trek fans, myself included, are curious to see what he could do if he decides to commit to directing this R-rated script set in the Kelvin timeline that's already been written by Mark Smith. I've listened to interviews where Tarantino discusses Star Trek, the original series, as well as The Next Generation, and he's clearly a total fanatic for Star Trek. So that would be really interesting, new terrain for him that's been previously totally unexplored. And also he'd be working with another screenwriter on this, so it might be a fun way for him to kind of change things up creatively. But he's also expressed an interest in doing a miniseries for TV, which might be a good fit because his screenplays are these sprawling, giant, uncontainable exercises in narration, and perhaps TV might be a better fit. But in preparation for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he wrote a few episodes of the imaginary show Bounty Law, the show that was the peak of Rick Dalton's career. So I'd be all for seeing Tarantino do Bounty Law or another Western on TV. His last 3 movies have all showcased his maniacal affection for the Western genre, so why stop now? It's clearly a style of storytelling that he's never grown tired of at any point in his life. I just hope that after a nice long break, Tarantino finds something to get excited about because he's too damn young and he's too damn talented to quit on us now. At any rate, it's getting late. It's 1 a.m. here in New York. It's time to wrap this up. But I hope you enjoyed my little late night rant. I strongly encourage everybody to check out that New Beverly schedule and start watching some of those movies. Definitely check out that Pure Cinema podcast episode. It's one of those things where I've been watching movies religiously for like 20, 25 years at this point, and I always feel like I kind of know a thing or two about old movies. But then when you listen to a long conversation with somebody who knows way more, you realize you're not a black belt. You're just a white belt. You're just a novice. And there's still a long way to go in that journey of becoming a true cinephile. But if you want to talk more about any of the above mentioned topics, you can always find me on Twitter at Colbrax, or just leave me a comment in the comments below. I expect there'll be a lively debate surrounding this movie, and I'm looking forward to all of it. But if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I'd really appreciate it. Give this video a like, all that good stuff. But hope you enjoyed the video. Can't thank you enough for watching. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.